buy a car and get a free pony? I mean, a live horse? Yep, that's a marketing campaign somebody did. Hello and welcome to Corey Turner Talks Cars. And if you'll believe it, yes, that was a decision a marketing team thought would be a great idea, is to have people come in and test drive a car and get registered to win a free pony. Now, we're not talking about a pony car, because that would be awesome. We're actually talking about a real horse, because this happened back in 1958 and 1959 with the Edsel. Now, if you're not familiar with the Edsel, we have the Ford Motor Company. Of course, they had Lincoln and they had Mercury, and they decided they needed a brand kind of to fit in between the Ford brand and the Mercury brand as far as that price range. They decided to make a new line of cars, and they decided to name it Edsel. Now, we'll talk more about why they decided to do that and more about the Edsel brand on our podcast. I'll be sure to put that link in the description, and you can check us out at CoreyTurnerTalks.com. But we'll talk more about that. But yes, so they decided to make the Edsel. Now, the Edsel had, let's just say the Edsel had a lot of problems. And there was a host of problems, not only from the design of the car, trying to do too much at once, to the name of the car, causing some people to be very aggravated and upset and possibly not building the best car that they could, to the designing of the car, and to the Actually, no. Except for the pony, the marketing of the car was actually really, really strong. But the car itself was not. And Ford found out that they were having some major issues with the car. So, as a matter of fact, the car was having so many problems. It was built, honestly, off of a design team who was out there researching, getting a lot of feedback from a lot of different people, trying to find out what the public wanted. Sometimes the public doesn't know exactly what the public wants. So it was kind of a smorgasbord of survey results and what other cars had, and then some technology that maybe was a little ahead of its time or not completely thought out. The car did possess a touch button transmission so that you could just push the transmission. It was located right in the center of the steering wheel. You could push drive or park. Now, a couple of problems. One, if you're in a panic situation, what do you hit? Well, you hit the horn, right? Well, in this case, you would change the transmission, change the gear, which that's probably not good at speed. Also, the transmission itself, the solenoids that ran that weren't really strong enough to help the car if it was on a hill and park to be able to switch gears. So you had to make sure to apply the parking brake and then hit park. And also, you didn't want to overrun the solenoid, so you really needed to do push park, to reverse, to neutral, to drive. Yeah, so it was a very complex and not a really easy system to use. So the Edsel already had some problems there, and the wiring ran too close to the exhaust manifold, and sometimes that would burn through and not work or cause it to change gears. Also, like I said, it's named the Edsel. So where did the name Edsel come from? Well, that was the son of Henry Ford. And he actually ran Ford in the early 1915-ish, 1920, somewhere in that time frame. I don't know the exact dates at the moment, slipping me. But he ran Ford. And so it was decided to name it after him. Now, it wasn't the Ford family. The Ford company had already gone public as far as stock options and selling stocks. So they weren't in complete control at that time. Henry Ford II, Deuce, you may remember him from Ford versus Ferrari, if you saw that movie. If not, you need to check out my review of that. They weren't really on board with naming it Edsel. As a matter of fact, they were not even at the board meeting. As somehow they arranged it where he wasn't at the board meeting when they announced that. But they announced it to name it Edsel. And this caused some problems because there were some people within the company at all levels that may not have had the best, fondest memory of Edsel. He was a very smart businessman, but drove a process that didn't rub everybody correctly, and some of those fell on the assembly line. So there were some speculation, I will say, that people decided not to make the Edsel cars as well as they made the Ford cars. Sabotaging your own company, but that sounds like that may have been what was happening. Also, there wasn't dedicated assembly lines for the Edsel. So as you had Ford cars coming through the assembly line, those cars, you've got somebody who's used to doing the same task and want to do the same task and continue to do that, and then all of a sudden you got in a rhythm of that, and then on like the 8th or 9th car is suddenly an Edsel. You've got to change what you were doing. It's a totally different kind of setup to create the Edsel as opposed to the other car that was on the line, and that just caused, also, by doing that, you can't slow down the line. So you're going to have to stay at the same speed. So it wasn't that manufacturing process that Ford had engineered and had got it to be where it was, where things just move smoothly. You're talking about a kind of a mess, actually. All of a sudden you're doing this, and now you've got to stop. Okay, this is an Edsel. This is different. And I got to get it down the line as fast as the one where I know exactly what to do. So that meant that a lot of the cars, as they came off the assembly line, they would go through an audit to see how well they were built, and they had to pass that audit. But a lot of them just barely did or almost did. I'm not. It wasn't as good as you would like to see. It wasn't what it was as good as it could be. So a lot of those cars were shipping to the dealers, and they decided that the dealers will deal with the finishing of some of those cars. So sometimes the dealers would get the car, they would open the trunk, and there's parts in there, trim parts, exterior parts. Okay, so then they would have to go through and fix this. There was a lot of issues that should have been dealt with and fixed prior to shipping, but with the pressures of this needing to be a positive thing, of the Edsel needing to go, okay, those cars ship. So now the dealers are having to deal with finishing the car and dealing with people that are upset because their car does not function as it should. And it didn't look as good as it should. Now, Ford thought it must be the marketing. That must be why these cars are sitting on showroom floors and not sitting in customers' driveways where they wanted them to be. So what they did, and honestly, it wasn't the marketing. The marketing had done actually a really, really good job. As a matter of fact, it was, I think, one of the second best launches of a brand new brand at that time, and they did a really good job with it. They had done some TV shows. They even had the Edsel show that had like Bob Hope and some big time Bing Crosby, had some big time singers on it. It was a variety show. We got all kinds of awards for being this amazing variety show, and it was all centered around the Edsel. You got Frank Sinatra singing, and you've got people dancing, and it was a perfect fit for that time. And so that was actually a great marketing campaign that really got people looking. But there was some things wrong with the Edsel in itself. Now, they had a multiple line of cars, the Corvair, the Ranger. They had convertibles. They had the big station wagons and the big estates. But they were designed originally to fit the gap between the Ford and the Mercury. So if you understand, at that time, you had Ford. The next step up, you had Mercury. And then if you go back above that, the top of the line was Lincoln. Now, Lincoln at that time was getting killed by Cadillac. That was GM's top of the line. Then they also had Buick, and they had Oldsmobile. So Ford knew, we want to push Lincoln into that. They really wanted Lincoln to go into have another marquee name called Continental. And they wanted Continental to go after like Rolls-Royce and those kind of things. That was kind of nixed, but they wanted to take another step. But they wanted to push Lincoln into the worlds of Cadillac. They wanted the Cadillac brands, them to go after the Cadillac models. So they were going to push Lincoln up. Mercury is here. It's trying to fight more with like the Buicks and the Oldsmobiles. All those are a little bit different, but they're in that area. So by pushing Mercury up a little bit. So now you should have a gap between Ford and Mercury. That's where Edsel was going to fit in, right? Ford is everybody's car. The Edsel then was going to be someone who's on their way up. They've got a little bit of money to spend. Then they become successful. They get to Mercury, and then they get really successful. They got to Lincoln. So that was how Edsel was supposed to fit into the hierarchy of the Ford model range. However, when they launched the Edsel, for whatever reason, there really wasn't a break in the pricing. They were not as different as you thought they would be. So you had some Edsel cars that were overlapping with the Ford cars, and you had some Edsel cars that were overlapping in price-wise with the Mercury cars. So now it's why would you do that? Why would I buy an Edsel? Which meant the Edsel had to be perfect, and it wasn't. We already talked about some of the issues they had with maintenance and manufacturing and fit and finish, all of that. Then also you have a very distinctive styling cue of what we call the horse collar in the front. That was, you either hated it or despised it. It seemed like it doesn't seem like there was a lot of people that were like, hey, that looks really good. Originally, the design of that horseshoe, that design of that front grille was supposed to be a lot narrower and sleeker, but engineering was worried about the overheating of the engine, so they expanded that and made that larger. So now you had a much larger, and then there was some people later on within the company like, make it bigger. Bigger is better, and they made it bigger, and so now you've got this giant horse collar. So if you didn't like the looks of the car, well, you could just buy a Mercury, same price or very close to it, and get a car that definitely fit more into the mainstream, didn't have a transmission that you would change gears when you honked, and would probably have a better fit and finish. So that was a problem. Going into 1959, they're trying to figure out how in the world are we going to get these Edsels sold? How are we going to get them, off of showroom floors? It must be a marketing. Now, we already talked about the marketing. Actually, was great. But at that time, they were like, it must be marketing. So what did they do? Okay, so there was a great TV show at the time called Wagon Train that was a very popular primetime show. So they kind of teamed up with that and came out with the idea, get this, if you come test drive an Edsel, then you get put into a drawing for a pony. That's exactly right, a live horse. Okay. What? Okay, so anyway, that's what they did. So, people, of course, every kid wants a pony, so families are coming in, they're test driving the Edsels, and they're getting put into the drawings. So Ford decided they'd go ahead and use it as a marketing campaign to buy those horses. So they bought 1,000 ponies and they shipped them to dealerships across the country. They didn't send 1,000 to each dealership, but they sent horses across the country. So now think about this. You're a dealer. They've pushed this Edsel product on you. It is not living up to expectations. When they show up on the trucks to get to you, you're having to finish them. You're having to put trim, whatever surprise comes in the trunk, whatever junk's in the trunk. When it shows up, you're having to finish the car, let alone fix and maintain a good relationship with your clients who are coming in for maintenance because the cars are breaking down, they're not working correctly. You've got all of that, and now you have to figure out how to build a pen for horses and feed them and clean up after them and take care of a live animal. Obviously, this caused a lot of strain between the execs at Ford and their dealers. This was not anything anybody had ever decided they wanted to be a part of, and it wasn't working. So Ford took a long look. Now, what's funny is, everybody was coming in to get ponies because their kids wanted ponies. But what happened was when they won, most people opted for the $250 cash option as opposed to the pony. So they bought all these ponies, and then yet they're also having to do the cash option instead. Now they're stuck with the ponies. Luckily, Ford ended up taking those ponies back. But I mean, that was the $250 at that time, 1959. That's $1,700, $1,800. So I'm like, that was a pretty good cash option. So Ford had to figure out, they shipped all those horses back. Ford had to figure out what to do with those horses. So it was pretty unfortunate there. By the time that ended, I think Ford had decided that it's not marketing. The cars are not well built. They were not well engineered. And there was so many problems, and they took a lot of chances. They built a brand new engine for it. And it had issues as well. There was some compression issues and things with the cylinders that caused some problems, and they were very hard to diagnose and very hard to fix. So if one came in and the engine was having issues, well, yeah, you're kind of out of luck there. So Ford realized we're losing money. They sold 116,000 units, but they had produced like 118,200. So unfortunately, they were 2,000 units short of selling what they produced, and also they sold maybe a little under half of what they needed to be considered even a break-even situation there with the Edsel. So the Edsel brand is losing money. It wasn't managed well. It wasn't designed well. It wasn't implemented well. It was marketed really well. And so they finally decided in November of 1959 that they were going to mark that Edsel was done. So they continued making cars, I think, through that year, and they were selling them as 1960s models. But you could also get a credit for a 1960 model if you bought one towards another Ford product. So they had some different things there that they were doing at that. At the end of the day, Ford lost about $350 million, which in today's money is a little over $3 billion. So it was not a good experiment. The original idea, I think, was strong, but when they really started implementing it and they started designing it and kind of a design by committee and trying to make everybody happy on everything and making some really strong design cues and some really innovative things with the push button transmission and all of that really hadn't been ironed out yet, and a brand new engine on top of that, it was too big of a mountain to climb all at once when it wasn't set up as its own from the very beginning, its own manufacturing plant, its own assembly lines, in a more well thought out product. So unfortunately, even though they were giving away ponies, they could not sell the Edsel, which is sad in many ways, but a good lesson of, if you're going to do something, you got to do it right on all aspects. We talked about firing on all cylinders, and the Edsel, no. The marketing part actually was pretty good. Not the pony. I think the pony was I think the pony was reaching at, grasping for straws, but anyway, that's kind of where they ended up on that. So the poor Edsel went away. A lot of people think the Edsel was one car. It wasn't. It was a lineup of cars. It was a brand like Lincoln, Mercury, Ford, Edsel. Sure didn't live up to Edsel Ford's name in any way. So if you know anybody that owned a Edsel or you've been around an Edsel, be sure to leave that in the comments. I'd like to see them. I think now looking back, they're cool cars. I like the style. Still, the grill is not my favorite. I still have a hard time appreciating the grill. I like that someone does something bold, but I don't think it was a very good look at the time. So even now. But I still think they are really, really cool cars. So thank you for watching. Remember to like and comment and share. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. This show, I tell you what, I'm just going to put this show on the podcast as it is. I think we talked about a lot. I was just going to talk about the pony, but I start talking. And so I talked about all of it. So this is going to be our podcast as well. So if you want to listen to our podcast, please go to CoreyTurnerTalks.com. You can check that out. If you have ideas for future shows, put that in the comments. And don't forget, tomorrow's Friday, so we got Friday Funnies on the way. It's time for a laugh. So thank you all so much. Let's talk about cars tomorrow.